our newly elected, very hardworking public housing resident, Ms. Diana Ayala.
I just want to reclaim Danny Barber as my own. Gail's gonna try to steal him. That's my boo. He always has been and he always will. But thank you guys for coming out on a Saturday, and we miss all of those resident association leaders that couldn't be here today because they're out there today celebrating their family days, because they would have been here. I know that they would have. I think this year was a very transformative year for public housing. It was a year of action, and a lot of that had to do with the residents. And so you should be really proud of that work and proud of your advocacy. Someone mentioned, that we need exposure. We need to amplify the needs of each and every one of your developments, and that is what brought about change. That brought in millions of dollars this fiscal year alone, and that was because you made that happen. So when you meet in these forums and everybody is so passionate about what's happening, in the day-to-day, we're having, we don't have heat, our boilers are breaking down, our elevators, we all know that. And what I would say to you and what I say to my resident leaders when we meet is that we need to shift the focus on action, because we know what the issues are. And if we focus our attention on every meeting on just highlighting and beating those issues on the head when we know what they are, then we're not moving the needle forward. So we need to take these opportunities and create those smaller working groups. I do that in my district. I actually have two. I have one in East Harlem that just met with NYCHA officials, and I'm doing the one in the Bronx because my district is broken up between two boroughs, but I find them to be very helpful in localizing and bringing awareness to those issues that affect my constituency. We actually even requested a breakdown of every single investment to public housing, every dollar that has come in. You can request that. Your council member can request that. So you can organize your developments, bring in your council members, and have them make that request so that you know what's coming in from the federal government, what's coming in from the state, what's coming in from the city, and for what. Once the money's there, however, I would say that then you move on to a different project, right? Because if you're getting money for a boiler, and we know that it's going to take a year, it's going to take two, but we continue to make that the issue, again, we're not moving the needle forward. So what I say is just use your time wisely, use us as elected officials. I have an open door policy. We also have a NYCHA legal clinic, so any resident that's having any, legal dispute with public housing or would like, some legal advice, every second Tuesday of the month between 10 and 1 at 105 East 116th Street, you're more than welcome. It's not localized to my district. Anyone in the city can utilize those resources. And again, congratulations, because it was a very transformative year, and I look forward to many more. Continue to amplify and continue to bring in, our younger people, get them involved, use them as a tool. When we have the annual hearings, I will tell you, I was talking about this with Gail, no one shows up to the annual hearing. That's where you need to bring in this energy, and you need to bring in this anger, because not enough residents show up to that. Together here, we're partners. So thank you again for having me. I am excited to represent you each and every day, and I look forward to continuing the working relationship. I just forgot to mention I'm the council member for the 8th district, so I represent East Harlem and the South Bronx. So many of you in the room know me. Thank you.
So, our next speaker, I would like to introduce our City Council Housing Chair. Her name is Alika Samuels, and I want to say that without her coming forward as well to the public to hold City Council hearings on our devastating conditions, I cannot say that most of this would not have been brought to light. Alika, would you please come?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Councilwoman Alika Ampry Samuel, and I do serve as the chair of the Public Housing Committee in the New York City Council. I actually represent an amazing community in the great borough of Brooklyn. I represent the 41st Council District, representing Brownsville, Ocean Hill, Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, and East Flatbush. And so I apologize for my tardiness because this morning we had the We Run Brownsville race and I had to participate. But I did come with my mom, who's in the back right now. And I'm recognizing my mom because my mother actually moved into public housing as a young girl in the development with her own mother. So my grandmother lived in public housing, and my grandmother died when my mother was a teenager, and she had to take care of her own younger siblings as well as me and my brother because she was a young mother. And we wound up moving into the Marcus Garvey houses in Brownsville. So I'm a product of public housing, and I'm proud of it every single day. And I heard that there were some folks in the audience who were from different countries. And that also hits home for me because as a product of public housing, I had the great opportunity to represent the United States of America under our former president, who's still my president, Barack Obama, as a human rights officer for the United States Department of State. So I worked for the State Department at the United States Embassy in Ghana with a West Africa portfolio. And but I just want to say the portfolio that I managed, the human rights portfolio, which was interesting, my role representing the government was to go into developing countries, spread diplomacy, and talk about how the United States can help developing countries, right? What can we do to make sure that people around the world have safe housing, right? That they have running water, that they have electricity, that they don't live in conditions where their health care leads them to, asthma and bronchitis and all these respiratory diseases. We go around the world and make sure that the water is clean, right? That there's no lead and everything else. So that was my role for the United States in developing countries. For 3 years, I worked at the U.S. Embassy. And when I came home, right, I came home to just pure craziness because now I'm seeing when I come back home that, are you kidding me? So all those reports that I sent back to Washington, to Congress, about what other people are doing wrong in their countries, you kidding me right now? It seems like what happens right here in the United States of America, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and what's happening right here in New York City, one of the wealthiest cities, right, in our country, we're living in some of the worst conditions when you compare them to countries around the world, developing countries. Are you kidding me, right? And so this conference right here, this public hearing is about a seat at the table. So I was just a small voice having a conversation about what's going wrong, but I ran for office because I know that we needed that lens of public housing. We needed someone to have a seat at the table to understand what's going on when we talk about sitting with our administrators. And there's a lot of bright people, right? A lot of smart people making a lot of decisions at the table, but they don't have that same lens that we have when we come from low-income communities, when we come from black and brown communities, when we come from communities where they don't listen to us. And so I partner with my best friend. Her name is Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, who sits on the Housing Committee in the State Assembly. And we were just two little girls who grew up in the public housing in Brownsville who wanted to have a seat at the table to make a difference. And so that's my role in the City Council. We held the first public hearing for the City Council this year, and the first public hearing was around the heat and hot water controversy and just the craziness that happened over the course of the months in the winter, where you had 320,000 families who were without heat and hot water. But when we talk about a seat at the table, for the first time for this year, we had the residents speak before the agency, and that was a big deal.
Thank you.
And as I'm closing, I just want to mention the reason why that was such a big deal. Because usually the agency will speak first at public hearings, and they will go on for about 10, 15, 20 minutes about all the great things that they're doing. And when the agency finishes with their testimony, they get up, they leave, and all of the press leave with them. But what we did for the first public hearing was make sure that Danny Barber had an opportunity to speak, right? And we made sure that all of the resident association leaders had an opportunity to speak, so that NYCHA could hear, so that the public could hear, so that the media could hear what's really happening. And so that was a big deal, and I will continue to do that. In my role as the chair of public housing, you have that partnership in me, and I look forward to whatever I can do to make sure that we always have a seat at the table. Thank you.
The next speaker I would like to introduce is, I have to say, he's from Harlem Hospital. He was born and raised. He allocated $500 million from the state. So I would, without further ado, I want to give you State Senator Brian Benjamin.
Thank you. I am not speaking after Alika Samuel ever again. I already now know what needs to happen. So let me first thank the council for letting me say a few words. I want to talk about this from a different angle, because I think some of the comments made by the young man in the blue is very appropriate. Right now, NYCHA developments, and I'm going to talk big picture because you are the tenant leaders, so I want to talk big picture for a second. Right now, my understanding, NYCHA's looking at $32 billion of capital repairs across the portfolio. And from what I am told, and I know Alika might know better than me on this, on an operating level, NYCHA is running at a major deficit, right? Okay. Now, we just had the consent decree that many of us think is inappropriate, and even if it was appropriate, inadequate, because when you talk about needing $30+ billion, $2 billion is a drop in the bucket, okay? It's a drop in the bucket. So, ultimately, what we are looking at, and by the way, that $2 billion is only for lead, asbestos, elevators, heat, a few of the issues. So ultimately, what we're looking at, in my opinion, is a systematic effort, whether it's conscious or unconscious, to basically starve NYCHA out so that this property could end up being used for something else. That's my interpretation of the situation. So the real question for us is, what are we going to do collectively to make sure that we have a comprehensive plan, not a piece by piece, bit by bit? Because what ends up happening, because we don't have the resources, because the Fed has pulled back all the money, what ends up happening is, as was mentioned earlier, whenever there's a big noise or stink about something, a couple of dollars get found from somewhere to go run patch it up to get it out of the press and the media. Meanwhile, that same situation is happening practically everywhere else. So, in my opinion, and this, we have to have a comprehensive plan. And the question is, who does that plan come from? Does that plan come from NYCHA leadership, or does that come from the community along with leaders like Alika Samuel, who actually understand public housing and is extremely smart and understands budgeting? I used to do affordable housing. I understand how that works. We need to have who mentioned, I think Beverly mentioned a task force, but a serious conversation around how we're going to deal with this big picture. There's multiple conversations, right? I mean, there's the day-to-day issues, and that needs to happen. On the state level, we do not manage that. That is New York City Housing Authority, New York City Public Housing. Our job as a state level is to kind of step back and say, okay, can we get more resources? For example, I was mentioned earlier, I, along with Assembly Member Robert Rodriguez, was helped to get $550 million allocated. That's a drop in the bucket, right? I mean, by the time people fight for who gets that $550 million, it's gone overnight. So that is all Band-Aid stuff on a problem that is way bigger than these little small Band-Aids that we can celebrate ourselves around. So I really believe, and obviously Brother Barber is a strong force and you've been on top of this, we have got to have a comprehensive plan conversation. Because the truth of the matter is, I have the most NYCHA for any state senator in the state. Assemblymember Rodriguez has the most NYCHA for any assemblyman in the state. Obviously, this is a bigger group and many are coming from all over the city. But we locally here, we have people like Alika who actually lived in public housing and others. We've got to come up with a comprehensive plan. And that's really my message for today. Because otherwise, 5 years later, we'll be having this conversation. In 2005, NYCHA's capital repair needs was $6 billion. Somehow in 13 years, that has grown to $32 billion. Now that might be the right number, might be the wrong number. I don't know what the right number is, but the point is, if we don't have a real plan that we work on collaboratively, we're not going to have real change. And so my commitment is I'm going to continue to be working with my colleagues to try to press for this, but we need the mayor and NYCHA to really take the lead on their end, but on our end, this needs to happen. Instead of us really going after our little issues, so I have an issue, I have an issue, I have an issue here, let's come together and have a big conversation around how we're going to save NYCHA going forward. Thank you.
Are you taking questions, sir? Are you taking questions? Our next speaker is Assemblyman Michael E. Taylor. Al Taylor. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Somebody say amen. Amen. I know it's kind of weak, but that's okay. I am Reverend Al Taylor, and I pastor a church in Harlem, but I'm also an assemblyman, and I represent Wrangell Houses, Polo Grounds, and Harlem River. All right? But the other part of that is, when I was kind of not where I thought I needed to be in life, and I didn't have a lot of self-esteem, I did some of those crazy things some of the kids you see do today. I lived in Dyckman Housing at the time. And what I want to say to you is, one, thank you for coming out this morning. I want to encourage you to continue to come out. And the news will probably get worse before it gets better. But I want to encourage you to stay in the fight. Every day, people come into my office that are non-NYCHA, and the issue is they can't find affordable housing. And they make decent money, but they cannot find affordable housing in the city. And they're getting pushed, they're getting pushed. What does that have to do with you? You're sitting on a gold mine that has a deficit. You all are game changers. The city is doing what they do best, but it's still not enough. The federal government has decided not to give the money that's needed to move this thing forward. But at the same time, they privatized some of the property that's managed by NYCHA. Big picture. We're not in it. We're not in it. But we can be a game changer to make sure that we're in it. Most of the time, because we have a sense of hopelessness, not you all, but their residents, and no matter what you say, what you do, the response is, it won't matter, it won't change, why bother? We need to get everybody involved. This room should have been standing room only. Hey, listen, I understand I'm preaching to the choir, but let me share something. When I smoked more dust than I can remember, when I failed the GED 4 times, when I said that I saw more judges in front of me, and I didn't have a bright future, and I met a man by the name of Judge Bruce Wright. They call him Turn Loose Bruce. Turn Loose Bruce saw more in me than I saw in myself. I joined the military and it became a game changer. I didn't join to be successful. I joined because I would die and my mother needed to pay for the funeral. I've seen too many cans to pay for the casket. We're still there right now, 40 years later. I'm saying, don't get sick and tired. Get up and continue to get up until you have no more breath in your body, and continue to fight. Fight with your neighbor. Even though you're doing the pushing, they're going to win. 20% of the people do the work, 80% of the people win. Right. We have to continue. We cannot afford to stop the fight. The struggle is real, people. And just before I get out of your way, I've been in this neighborhood, but on prayer walks only. I started prayer walks in the Polo Ground, Wrangell Houses, St. Nick, Edgemere and Far Rockaway, and Grand Houses. And when I walk from New York City to Chicago, there's one on the south side of Chicago. I'm saying we can do anything, but we got to show up in numbers. Listen, if there were buses to Atlantic City, you talk about you want to see the healed? We can do this. It's It's not going to happen with appeal. It's not going to happen with administration. It's going to happen because of you. Don't forget the struggle in the civil rights. Don't forget the war for the vote. Don't forget the people that will live for the vote. Just because we've arrived, we've not arrived. I just want to encourage you. That's all I stopped by to do, is encourage you.
Thank you.
Anybody encouraged today? Now just one more, I'll leave you with this. There were two guys, and just for literary purposes, there were two guys, and the word was, I need you two to join those 10, and the 12 of you go out and spy that land. But now, they went and they looked at that land, and 2 of them believed everything they saw, but the other 10 said, that's not for us. We can't do that. We look like grasshoppers in their eyes. It's insurmountable. But when my best friend told me they wouldn't give me any money because I didn't have the experience to walk to Chicago, August 7th to September 7th, I walked 780 miles. You can do anything that you want to do. And so at the end of this scenario, what I want to give you is 40 years later, 10 people have perished, but the 2 that believe that they succeed, they were 80-something years old, and they said, you promised me something, let me have it. And I submit to you today, you have a promise, get it, and don't stop till you get it. God bless you.
Not too much to say after that. I want to thank everybody for coming out. But before you leave, you have a task. And that was one of the purposes of this meeting. So you have these papers on the table. And I want people to fill them out. You need to fill them out. I have one of my board members here, Mr. Davis, and give him all of your sheets of paper. We have lunch that we're going to be serving there, light refreshment. But I also want to thank all the people that participated. I want to thank the council, the CCOP council, Maria Forbes, Ms. Nimmons, Mr. John Johnson. Those are residents who stay on the ground all the time. All of my board members, are they here? I think all of my board members are here. The Manhattan North Board, I thank you all for coming out because my board have been very supportive. Our resident is a very strong body, and they continue to come out to learn more and to fight more. And we want people to join in with us on that fight. So I want to thank you, I appreciate it. And clearly all of our international people. Can we give them a hand, please? We appreciate you coming out, we appreciate your stories. It has been very inspiring. And it should not be the last time that we get together with our folks from the other countries. Because at the end of the day, it was one thing that I had to learn. There's public housing all over the world. Everywhere there's public housing. You know, some of it is similar and some of it isn't, but it's still public housing. So again, I do appreciate the United Nations for doing this meeting with us. And of course, Jan Peterson with the Wyrell Commission, who has done a lot of stuff locally and nationally and internationally around helping women to organize and to take more charge of their particular communities.